Hey guys, I'm Adam and today I'm going to teach you how to make what I call the butterfly babka. This is a fluffy, chocolatey dessert bread and it's actually a lot easier to make than it looks. We're going to be using a challah dough for this recipe and I actually hadn't heard of it before I went into baking school, but because it's rich and it has this amazing fluffy texture, it's definitely one of my go-tos. If you want, you can technically use a brioche dough or some sort of cinnamon bun dough, but I highly recommend that you give this dough a try if you haven't before. All of these doughs have quite a bit of heavy ingredients like eggs or honey, and what that does is it interferes with yeast activity. Basically what that means is that these doughs take forever to proof. In order to get around this, we're actually going to divide our recipe into two parts. In the first part, we'll make our sponge, and that's going to give our yeast a little bit of a head start. In the second part, we're just going to add in the rest of our ingredients. If you've never done this before, it may sound a tiny bit intimidating, but I promise it's actually super simple. So, let's get started. Let's start by making our sponge. To a mixing bowl, we'll add the first part of our flour, yeast, and water. And give it a mix until it becomes all incorporated and uniform. This is what we'll be looking for. So if it's too dry, you can add a little bit of water, or if it's too wet, a little bit of flour. Just make sure to only add a little bit of either when adjusting the consistency. Cover the bowl with plastic wrap and leave it in a warm place until the dough doubles in size. If you want, you can do this step in advance and put it in the fridge to proof overnight. When it's done proofing, it'll look something like this, and that's it for the first part. Your sponge is finished, and we'll move on to step 2. Take your completed sponge and transfer it to the mixing bowl of a stand mixer. To this bowl, we'll add the second part of our flour, then add our sugar, salt, water, an egg yolks, honey, and vegetable oil. Bring it to your stand mixer with a dough hook attachment, or if you're doing this by hand, you can start kneading it on a well-floured surface. Start the mixer on first speed just to bring the ingredients together, and as the dough starts to form, you can increase the speed by 1. You'll know the dough is ready when it starts to pull away from the sides of the bowl and it looks smooth. While this is mixing, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how long it takes to mix or bake something. It kind of sucks, but these times are never 100% accurate, and they're really just approximations. What I mean by that is you could make this recipe on one day, and it could take 5 minutes to mix, and then you could make it on a second day, and it could take 7 or even 10 minutes to mix. A lot of people will prefer to give you a time range or tell you to add a couple more minutes if you need to, but there are so many factors like temperature, humidity, your type of mixer that could change the baking or proofing times. So it's actually easier and more reliable to use sight and feel to determine if your doughs are ready or not. As you continue to make more and more bread recipes, you'll get a better feel for things, and it might take a few tries at different types of recipes, but the good thing is that most doughs look very similar when they're finished mixing. You will also notice that if you pass it back and forth between your hands, it won't stick. And that brings us to the last and most important check, the window test. Take a portion of the dough and gently stretch it between your fingers and then hold it up to a light source. You should be able to stretch it thin enough so that the light can pass through. What you're checking for is how well the gluten has developed. The gluten strands create a window, and if that looks very uniform and light passes through pretty evenly, then the gluten development is sufficient. This is what we're looking for this particular dough. Next, we're going to cover up our bowl with a tea towel and leave it to bulk ferment until it doubles in size. This could take half an hour or more, so I opt to use this time to catch up on some dishes. Hey! Alright, now that your dough has bulk fermented, before you start, flour your work surface with just enough flour so that the dough won't stick. Deflate or punch the dough with your hands to expel the excess gas that the yeast created, then fold the ends into the center, flip it over, and round it on your surface to create a ball. Here we just want to tuck the ends of the dough underneath itself so that it has a smooth surface. Cover it with plastic wrap and let it sit for 10 or 20 minutes just to give it an intermediate proof. This allows the dough to relax and will let us roll it out more easily. Now's time for the assembly. Flatten the dough with your palms and then use a rolling pin to shape it into a thin rectangle. If you didn't let the dough relax enough, it might be too elastic and will pull back and resist every time you roll it out. You can still relax the dough at this point, just give it 15 minutes or so and then come back to it. To your now rectangular dough, take your chocolate spread of choice and spread it evenly over the surface. I'm opting for chunky hazelnut spread just to add a little bit more texture. If you want, you can use jam or cinnamon sugar or any filling you have. Make sure to leave the space 1 inch from the edge of the dough closest to you empty. This empty space will allow us to neatly seal the dough once we roll it up. This is the point where you can put as much spread as you want to suit your taste. Just make sure that it's even, and note that the more you use, the longer it will take to do the final proof. But if you have too little, the chocolatey hazelnut taste will be a little lackluster. Starting from the edge furthest away from you, start to roll up the dough. Stretch it slightly as you roll to ensure that the dough is relatively tight and to increase the number of layers. When you get to that empty space, brush on a tiny bit of water to help seal it up before completing your roll. Place the side with the seam face down, and now we get to move on to the artistic part. Grab a bench scraper and make 2 cuts down the center, leaving the middle space intact. It'll be about 1 inch. You can also use a knife, just remember to use a cutting board. If you remember high school bio, it will look like sister chromatids. I mean, you remember meiosis and mitosis, right? Like metaphase, anaphase? Never mind. Place these revealed layers face up, then simply pinch the 2 ends together. Here you see me trying to get fancy and braid the 2 ends before I realize that it's not long enough, and then I ultimately give up and then I just pinch them together. Place your loaf into a pre-greased pan, cover it with plastic, and leave it in a warm place for our final proof. At this point, you can set your oven to about 350 Fahrenheit. This can take more than an hour, so you have some time to play with. You can go take a nap, read a book, or go watch some TV or something. I'm gonna go play some games. So I'm playing this game, and I built myself, your typical home gym, but if you actually look really closely, built inside of it is... That's right, a bar. To check to see if the loaf is proofed enough, it should leave an indent when you poke it. Brush your loaf with egg wash and place it into your oven. Set a timer for 20 minutes to start, and then add more time as necessary until you get that nice golden brown exterior. While that's in the oven, we're gonna go prepare an apricot glaze. This is to prevent the babka from drying out, as well as give it a really nice sheen. Take about a spoonful of apricot jam and cut it with a tiny bit of water. Then microwave it until it bubbles slightly. We opt for apricot jam here because it actually has a really neutral flavor and it won't clash with the chocolate. I've seen other recipes use simple sugar syrup, which is totally viable here and recommended if you plan to consume the babka over a couple of days. Once your babka is done baking and it's really nice and golden brown, take it out of the oven and grab your apricot glaze. We're going to want to brush on that apricot glaze immediately after the bread comes out of the oven. And ooh, would you look at that shine? Look at that. And there you have it, a chocolate butterfly babka. Nice and golden brown on the outside, and if you cut into it to get that nice cross section, it reveals that gooey chocolatey center. It took a little bit of time, but I think the results are totally worth it. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really does help. I'll see you in the next video, and try not to eat the entire loaf in one sitting.